Innocent young star of Dune, the dark-eyed detective of Twin Peaks, the polite villain hiding something awful underneath. However, none of them matched the face that fans saw in March 2026. A man born in 1959 had skin that appeared almost too smooth, gray roots, and a constricted jawline. Some claimed that it was simply aging catching up. Others claimed that in a clinic in London, something quite different had occurred behind closed doors. A facialist for celebrities, a gadget that most people have never heard of, and outcomes that make fans feel uneasy are all part of the story. The beginning of Kyle MacLachlan's narrative felt solid, serene, and very different from the bizarre worlds he would eventually explore on television. On February 22, 1959, he was born at Yakima, Washington's Yakima Valley Memorial Hospital, a peaceful rural community within a few hours' drive from the locations where Twin Peaks would eventually be shot. His early years appeared stable and typical. Born in 1934, his mother, Catherine Stone, promoted the arts and worked in public relations for nearby schools. Born in 1933, his father, Kent, transitioned from stockbroking to the legal profession. Craig and Kent Jr. were Kyle's two younger siblings, making him the eldest of three boys. Additionally, the family had Cornish, German, and Scottish ancestry. Life appeared orderly, respectable, and safe for a very long period. Then everything changed. Kyle's mother abandoned his father in 1976 when he was 17 and nearing the end of his senior year at Eisenhower High School. That breach occurred at the precise age when a person is attempting to figure out who they are, and it destroyed his perception of the ideal stable family life that had surrounded him. He was performing as Henry Higgins in My Fair Lady and Brinsley Miller in black comedy at the same time. As a result, he was entering performances that required presence, control, and emotional range at the same time as his home life was collapsing. The impact was significant. The anguish, perplexity, and abrupt instability all contributed to the character that viewers would eventually recognize in him on television. Even though he had the appearance of an all-American good man, there was always something uneasy about him. One of the most significant aspects of his presence in David Lynch's work would be that conflict, and things did not get any easier after that. While he was away filming Dune, his mother concealed her ovarian cancer diagnosis from him in 1983. She didn't inform him till later. Then in 1986, she passed away at the age of 52. Just prior to the release of Blue Velvet. The timing was terrible. After two further marriages, his father passed away in 2011 following surgery. Thus, the journey from Yakima to Hollywood was never only based on skill or ambition. Rupture, bereavement, and the gradual loss of the world that first gave him a sense of security also impacted that route. The fact that acting was not a lofty ambition he pursued as a child adds to the story's unexpectedness. Actually, it was almost an accident. He was encouraged to consider acting by an art teacher in Yakima when he was just 13 years old, but he refused. School plays were still stigmatized at that age, and he didn't want to be the child who everyone considered strange. Then he was tricked by two females who were in charge of a Charlie's Aunt play. They pleaded with him to try out, managed to get him to show up on the day of the audition in 1972, and that was it. When he went to the audition, something snapped right away. Before he had even made up his mind to wish it open, the door opened. His mom assisted in opening that door. He began leading a youth theater in Yakima in 1974, and at the age of 15, he signed up for his first production there. He had taken piano lessons for years from 1968 to 1973 before acting really took off. Later, he switched to classical singing. He was thereby being trained in control, performance, rhythm, and discipline even before he realized it. However, none of these appeared to be the start of a significant acting career. The stage had not been his childhood obsession. He had even thought about going into business, following in his father's footsteps. However, everything was altered by the trick audition, and once it altered him, the transformation continued to intensify. He was already landing major parts in 3 performances for the former Lyric Repertory Company in Logan, Utah by the summer of 1981, following his sophomore year. He was employed at Ashland's Oregon Shakespeare Festival in 1982. Then, in 1983, he began garnering the kind of notice that could transform a life while performing in Moliere's Tartuffe near Seattle. This young actor from Yakima was no longer simply another theater student working hard in relative anonymity when the talk surrounding that performance entered Dino de Laurentius's orbit. Now, even his first small-screen role seemed like a hint of what was to come. In 1980, he worked as an extra in The Changeling on the University of Washington campus, earning $10. Even though it was tiny, almost ridiculously small, it was a start. The true turning point happened during his time at the University of Washington. He wasn't entirely dedicated to drama when he joined in 1977. In Yakima, where many boys just followed their fathers into law, business, or practical vocations, it made natural that he leaned more toward communications, public relations, or business. However, in 1978, summer stock took place. In Look Homeward, he was the main character, Angel at the Playhouse in Flat Rock, and his life's course was altered by that encounter. Following that, he tried out for one of the most challenging programs offered by the university, the Professional Actor Training Program. The work was terrible, and the program lasted 3 years. 14-hour days, 6 days a week, constant training, constant pressure, constant sharpening of craft. He persevered, took an additional year, and earned a BFA in acting with honors. In June of 1982, even if the world he came from was shocked by his decision, he continued to move in that direction. To commemorate the family's Scottish heritage, he even altered the spelling of his last name from MacLachlan to MacLachlan. He was not going to use state junior tournaments to become a professional golfer, as his father had previously dreamed. Now he was creating something different, something that felt more entirely his own, but it was also stranger and less secure. Following college, he pursued a career in theater as the next practical step. His work with Seattle's Empty Space Theater preceded the event that altered everything. At the age of 22, he performed as Damus in Tartuffe at the Empty Space during the summer of 1981 while still enrolled in drama school. What's in drama school? The people of Dino de Laurentius were looking for a youthful lead for Dune at that time, a massive science fiction adaptation that will cost between $40 and $42 million. They were directed to Kyle by local suggestion. A casting agent recorded his audition in a room at the Four Seasons Olympic Hotel in Seattle on December 3, 1981, and submitted the recording to David Lynch in Mexico City. Lynch had just finished watching The Elephant Man, and he was instantly drawn to Kyle. Perceived innocence. He noticed interest. Instead of just explaining a riddle, he saw someone who seemed capable of stepping into it. Lynch would later claim that Kyle's portrayal of innocent people who were curious about life's secrets was crucial. Lynch selected Kyle MacLachlan, a young man with little prior film experience, to portray Paul Atreides despite the size of Dune, the fact that the production required over 20,000 extras, the presence of big stars, and competition from performers like Tom Cruise and Val Kilmer. On March 30, 1983, filming got underway at Churubusco Studios. Suddenly, a Yakima theater performer found himself involved in a large-scale motion picture and into the start of a decades-long collaboration. However, the first major break almost turned into the first major catastrophe. On December 3, 1984, Dune made its world debut at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., and then debuted in 915 theaters on December 14. It generated about $6 million in its first weekend and debuted at number 2 behind Beverly Hills Cop. However, the overall picture became unsightly quick. And despite having a budget of $40 to $42 million, it only made roughly $30.09 million globally. It was ripped up by critics. Roger Ebert rated it 1 star out of 4 and described it as the worst film of the year. He also described it as ugly, disorganized, and incoherent. Gene Siskel detested the ambiguity. You would require psychic abilities just to understand the plot, according to Janet Maslin of the New York Times. Later, he renounced the movie, acknowledging that he had given up too much power and lamented the lack of a final cut. In an effort to make it more understandable, his initial version, which had been over 4 hours long, was shortened to 137 minutes and filled with voiceovers. Frank Herbert agreed that significant portions were omitted, yet he nevertheless admired the picture. Is there any hope? Killed instantly for a sequel to Dune Messiah, this was frightening to Kyle. After being thrust into Hollywood, he appeared to be a young lad tied to a huge failure rather than the next big thing. Before his career had truly begun, he was afraid of being written off. He had let go of his agency by 1985 and was having trouble keeping up. He went to a Top Gun tryout, and Tom Cruise won the part. That may have easily been the story's conclusion. One enormous opportunity is given to a child from Yakima. Both the film and the accompanying future fall apart. Rather, David Lynch grabbed him once more. Lynch cast him as Jeffrey Beaumont in Blue Velvet just 2 years after Dune, a role that would fundamentally alter how people perceived the two of them. Throughout the late 1970s and early 1980s, the script made the rounds in Hollywood, but major studios consistently turned it down due to its graphic depiction of suburban America and violent sexual violence. Dino De Laurentiis, who was still ready to wager on Lynch, established a new label and advanced the project because Warner Brothers, Mean GM, and others were unwilling to participate. In the roughly $6 million movie, Kyle's character discovers a severed ear in a field, falls into a nightmare about Dorothy Valens, played by Isabella Rossellini, and Frank Booth, played by Dennis Hopper. Rossellini's agency dropped her and deemed her unmarketable since the content was so upsetting. Early screenings were abandoned by patrons. Reviews were extremely divided, with some criticizing the movie for being misogynistic and sadistic. Nevertheless, Blue Velvet became a cult classic over time, brought in $8.05 million, and earned Lynch an Oscar nod for Best Director. It was the role that completely transformed Kyle's life. Jeffrey Beaumont was drawn into decay despite having an innocent-looking face and an inquisitive intellect. Obsession and terror. Kyle was a fantastic fit for that blend. He was able to convey sincerity without coming across as straightforward. He was able to pass through unusual substances without disrupting their enchantment. Additionally, their relationship grew stronger because he trusted Lynch and they had a similar Pacific Northwest sensibility. In Twin Peaks, that link took on its most well-known form. Kyle subsequently said that FBI agent Dale Cooper used Jeffrey Beaumont as a direct model. Cooper was referred to by Lynch as an adult Jeffrey Beaumont, and Kyle concurred. The darkness surrounding him had affected Jeffrey as a young man. Cooper had greater command, self-assurance, and control when he went into the dark. Nevertheless, the link is clear. Jeffrey starts out in a field and discovers a tiny town's hidden tragedy. When Cooper travels to Twin Peaks to look into Laura Palmer's murder, he finds that the town's allure conceals something far stranger and older. Kyle served as the audience's entryway into a mystery in both situations, continued to go deeper. Twin Peaks was a huge hit when it debuted on ABC on April 8, 1990, one of the most watched TV pilots of the whole 1989-1990 season. The 2-hour pilot attracted about 34.6 million people in the U.S. on its debut night. It grabbed about 1/3 of the households watching television at the time, according to Nielsen standards. The nation was drawn into the same question almost immediately. Laura Palmer was murdered by whom? Additionally, the first season was nominated for more Emmys than any other series. Despite having only a few episodes, Twin Peaks was more than just a popular show for a short while. It was a preoccupation with culture. Dale Cooper was the focal point of that fixation. Cooper wasn't created by Kyle overnight. He did his own research on David Lynch. He observed Lynch's speech patterns, pauses, and attention to minute details before allowing those behaviors to permeate Cooper's body language and voice. This is a major factor in why the character seems so unique. The joyful intensity, the odd earnestness, the focus on trees, coffee pie, and small pleasures, that all originated in a real place. He wasn't just pretending to be an FBI agent. Lynch appeared to be a square-jawed, clean-cut investigator, but he was transforming that impression into a character who was both grounded and utterly out of the ordinary. Cooper's strange life was the result of his decision. Because he carried fragments of the guy who made the world around him, he never felt like a generic television police officer. The prizes came next. for his role as Cooper Kyle, won the 1991 Golden Globe for Best Actor in a Television Series Drama. He was also nominated for 2 Primetime Emmys for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Drama Series. He was no longer merely regarded at that point. On network television, he was one of the most talked about actors. The most bizarre aspect was that this was taking place through a bizarre murder mystery that included coffee rituals and dream logic. On mainstream American television, red curtains and other things that shouldn't have worked managed to do so. The character became well known outside of the program. Kyle was even nominated for a Grammy in 1991 for Diane's Best Spoken Word or Non-Musical Recording. Agent Cooper's recorded case notes and reflections served as the basis for the audio project known as the Twin Peaks tapes. That meant that through one role and the world around it, he had become a Golden Globe winner, an Emmy nominee, and a Grammy nominee in a brief amount of time. This kind of reach is uncommon and demonstrated Dale Cooper's complete assimilation into mainstream culture. Almost scene after scene, Kyle MacLachlan's romantic life appeared to progress in tandem with his job. He started dating his co-star Laura Dern back in the mid-1980s while filming David Lynch's eerie 1986 film Blue Velvet. They were dating from 1985 to 1989, just when they were both starting to gain notoriety. Their romance began just as their faces were beginning to emerge on magazine covers and award show screens, and they were still very young, barely into their 20s. Kyle would acknowledge years after that he did not manage the split properly. Nevertheless, he spoke warmly about Dern, describing her as a lifelong friend and called her very kind and compassionate. Quietly, the early relationship established a pattern. He would repeatedly fall in love with women he worked with. All the while, the public was watching. That pattern reappeared shortly after Laura Dern's relationship ended. Lara Flynn Boyle, who portrayed Donna Hayward on Twin Peaks, and Kyle began dating in 1990 and remained together until roughly 1992. Twin Peaks was more than just a popular program at the time. It was a complete cultural fixation. Every scene, every hint, every odd moment was being analyzed. As a result, it seemed as though everyone was witnessing Kyle's romance with another co-star in real time. While Kyle was still riding the wave of his rising celebrity in David Lynch's universe, Boyle was only in her early 20s. He was now the male lead in a series that would go on to become one of the 1990s most iconic programs. His real life seemed even more cinematic as a result of their romance, as if it were taking place in the same bizarre world as the show. After that romance ended, Kyle entered a completely other world. One of the original Big Five supermodels that dominated fashion in the 1990s, Linda Evangelista, started dating him in 1992. Linda was already one of the most influential faces in fashion when they first met at a photo shoot for Barney's New York. She was well known for declaring, "We don't wake up for less than $10,000 a day," and she was making enormous sums of money. Thus, this was not your typical celebrity romance. It was reminiscent of one of those iconic 1990s crossovers in which high fashion and Hollywood abruptly merged into one glitzy image. For Kyle, it put him squarely in the heart of glossy editorial covers, elegant parties, and the refined world of elite fashion, further removing him from the peculiar small-town vibe of his previous parts. Compared to the other relationships, that one lasted a lot longer. From 1992 to 1998, Kyle and Linda Evangelista dated for around 6 years. They were engaged for a number of years during that period. Nevertheless, Kyle never truly gave an explanation for the breakup, despite the fact that tabloids keenly monitored Linda's every move. He's always been quite circumspect when discussing it. Linda was one of the most well-known women in the world by the late 1990s. Frequently appearing on the covers of Harper's Bazaar, Vogue, and Elle. Therefore, it felt oddly quiet for something so ostensibly public when the engagement ended in 1998. The story of Kyle's romantic life was further complicated by the mystery surrounding that split, which persisted for years. Finally, the pattern shifted. In a way that seemed almost too typical for Hollywood, Kyle met publicist and businesswoman Desiree Gruber in 1999. They coincidentally had appointments at a chiropractor's practice in New York. After dating for around 3 years, they were married in a ceremony at Plymouth Congregational Church in Miami on April 20, 2002. Later, Desiree worked with Heidi Klum as an executive producer on Project Runway, which re-established Kyle's connection to the fashion industry in a more steady and behind-the-scenes manner. Additionally, this romance remained consistent in contrast to the ones that had characterized his early reputation. They've been dating for 23 years now. Callum, their 17-year-old son, was born on July 25, 2008. Their marriage eventually gained recognition as one of those uncommon, enduring Hollywood partnerships that genuinely seemed anchored. When compared to the trajectory of his career, that feeling of subdued stability seemed even more remarkable. When Showgirls collapsed in 1995, the situation was truly dire. Despite having a $45 million budget, the movie only made roughly $20.02 million worldwide. Additionally, at the time, it was often ridiculed. Critics referred to it as garbage. It made audiences laugh. Kyle's cinematic career seemed to have stagnated for a spell. Years later, the film would become a cult favorite and change people's perceptions, almost like an odd Medal of Honor. However, it was a painful flop at the time. Then he moved once more. He played Orson Hodge on Desperate Housewives in 2006, and Orson seems almost too nice at first. He was courteous. He apologized. He was the spouse of Marcia Cross's character, Brie Van de Kamp. Additionally, he appeared tidy, calm, and in charge. But gradually beyond that serene exterior, the truth started to show. As viewers discovered, he had a troubled background that included Orson, mistreatment of his first wife, and an obsession with power that made him one of the most terrifying characters on the show. From 2006 to 2011, he appeared in 5 seasons of the show. Additionally, Kyle established a very distinct position for himself on television throughout that time. He developed into the respectable-looking, well-dressed, soft-spoken man who conceals something sinister behind the surface. Orson was memorable because of the contrast. Although he wasn't always portrayed as a monster on paper, he frequently felt that way in real life. He veered off course once more, just as it appeared that this refined and menacing version of Kyle would become his permanent lane. He entered the comedy world in 2011 when he joined the FCC sketch series Portlandia as the mayor of Portland. It worked well, but it was such an abrupt shift that it nearly seemed like a joke in and of itself. From 2011 to 2018, the program operated for 8 seasons. And younger audiences had a completely fresh perspective on his work thanks to his recurring position as the mayor. He portrayed the part with a pleasant sincerity that helped the joke land even harder as he gently explained bureaucratic foolishness and ridiculous local regulations. Permits were required for small companies. Responsibility shorts were necessary for cyclists. Even though everything was absurd, he delivered it with such courteous authority that it became famous. This was the first true picture of Kyle MacLachlan for many younger fans who had never seen Twin Peaks or Dune. He almost unintentionally became a cult comic icon by the conclusion of Portlandia, demonstrating that an actor from the 1980s could still succeed in the self-aware internet era. After that, there was another turn. Few would have guessed. In 2024, Kyle became involved in the controversy surrounding Amazon as Vault 33 administrator Hank McLean. Hank appeared to be a capable leader and a loving parent at first, but as the narrative progressed, the character turned much darker. According to the background, he once gave the order for a nuclear weapon to be smuggled into shady sands in 2283, killing thousands of people and transforming his wife into a ghoul. When the show debuted on April 10, 2024, it quickly gained popularity. Kyle's ability to appear both friendly and frightening at the same time, frequently in the same scene, was commended. Online fans began making fun of him as a villainous father, but there was genuine admiration beneath the memes. In April 2024, Amazon renewed the show for a second season, and by May 2025, it had already received an early pickup for a third season, indicating that the corporation considered him to be a key component of the show's future. The timing was what made it even more remarkable. His last significant dark television role had been years before to Fallout. Now, in his late 60s, he had returned to high-end television. playing one of the most bizarrely human but morally reprehensible fathers on TV. He was not slowing down in his comeback. It was still expanding, if anything. Even by Lynch's standards, Kyle had to do odd scenes during the 2016 production of Twin Peaks Return. In one of them, he was massaged by heavy-bearded males who rubbed blood all over his face and his body. It seems ridiculous and unsettling, but Kyle later claimed that he was not scared since he had total faith in Lynch. The scenario was included in Episode 8, which debuted on June 25, 2017, one of the most stunning TV shows in recent memory. Such a surrender had previously been requested by Blue Velvet years before. With Isabella Rossellini, Kyle made appearances in unsettling, vulnerable scenes that were infused with horror rather than elegance, and psychological risk. Even the most frightening material felt safe enough to try under Lynch's serene certainty, so he continued to follow him there. According to Kyle, Lynch's complete faith enabled him to let go and devote himself entirely to the task at hand. Kyle has publicly acknowledged that his career would not have been possible without the strong trust. Lynch comforted him when he was young and insecure on Dune. Lynch later allowed him to direct the conversation and even assist in rewriting scenes from Twin Peaks and Blue Velvet, something that directors seldom let, particularly on television. Their artistic bond evolved beyond a professional partnership over time, established the foundation of Kyle's acting career. He has stated unequivocally that his profession would not exist without David Lynch. It is difficult to dispute that when you consider the timeline and the numbers. No Lynch meant no Golden Globe, no Twin Peaks, no Blue Velvet, no Dune launch, and no enduring cult character. Everything stems from that initial act of faith. Thus, Kyle's reaction was strong when David Lynch passed away on January 16, 2025, at the age of 78. That same day, he shared a very intimate homage on Instagram. He claimed that Lynch had brought him out of obscurity for Dune 42 years prior, and that Lynch's vision was the reason behind his entire career and existence. He referred to him as his spiritual anchor. Using the moniker that connected them in a way that only they could fully comprehend, he signed off with "Forever Your Kale." Because it did not read like a typical celebrity farewell, fans could sense the pain in it right away. It read like the death of a key figure. On January 15, 2026, a year later, Kyle continued to post about that absence, and it became difficult to overlook their relationship in its entirety during that anguish. This was more than just a fantastic actor-director collaboration. His entire artistic character was formed by that relationship. When he appeared on red carpets in 2025, people began to react emotionally, making that even more apparent. Because the impression people still had of him was the dark-haired, well-defined Agent Cooper from the early 1990s, some authors said he was practically unrecognizable. Abruptly, he appeared, displaying gray roots and a more organic salt and pepper appearance. The fact that he appeared elderly wasn't the true surprise. The reason was that he had the exact appearance of a man born on February 27, 1959. People were responding more to the clash between memory and reality than to age per se. They were compelled to examine the passage of time simultaneously, since they had frozen him in a single era. That contrast was further highlighted by the fact that he continued to be visible through 2025 due to his work on Fallout. He continued to be a member of a large-scale, intensive, high-energy production on screen. Off-screen, fans were discussing his gray hair, his face, and what it was like to watch someone who had spent so much time in popular culture get older. Fallout's second season was reported to be released in December 2025, after filming concluded on May 8, 2025. This meant that he had completed another major endeavor while people were still talking about how different he looked. That's one of the reasons the moment seemed so intriguing. He had not faded, according to the story. According to the article, he was still working at a high level, being active, and looking more like himself than ever. Furthermore, the response was heightened by Kyle's candor because he has never really based his persona on overt cosmetic control. Fans were not witnessing a meticulously orchestrated Hollywood metamorphosis. They were witnessing the slow, obvious approach of aging without any dramatic declaration. His image is so ingrained in people's minds that after more than 40 years in the public spotlight, even a minor alteration to his face or hair might feel enormous. He is still important today because of this. He is more than just an aging actor. He is one of those faces that people think they have known for ages. He continues to exist as a living pop culture illusion rather than only a recollection. Then, when his skin treatment unexpectedly became viral in 2026, that discussion took still another bizarre turn. At the age of 67, Kyle went to London facialist Karen Bartoff on March 18, 2026. Bartoff is well known for treating celebrities including Demi Moore, Kate Hudson, and Cindy Crawford. Bartoff broke down fat cells without surgery by heating them to 54 degrees Celsius using a gadget called Cool Waves, which uses patented microwave technology. The procedure is supposed to provide tightening without any downtime and penetrate deeper than lasers. Videos from the session showed Kyle lying under a towel without a shirt on while the metallic handpiece glided across his face, giving the impression that someone was ironing the skin around his jawline and cheeks. The entire process takes between 30 to 45 minutes. Afterward, he joked that he felt like he was 16 again, possibly 10. Aside from his knees, and the video rapidly went viral due to how horrific the outcome appeared. People were staring at how quickly everything seemed to happen. The films showed Kyle's face looking pink and newly tightened following the procedure, which Bartoff said was amazing for lifting and had no negative effects. In order to compress collagen and promote new development over the ensuing months, the device sends microwave energy into particular layers beneath the skin. After the session, Kyle, who claimed that his interest in skincare began in his 20s due to theater makeup, referred to Bartoff as a genius. After just one visit, reports said the procedure clearly lifted his jawline and revitalized his skin, which fueled the internet craze for non-surgical anti-aging. By the next day, pictures of him were all over the place, and people said he looked 20 years younger. His new visage was compared by fans to his Twin Peaks years. All of a sudden, the old Dale Cooper image reappeared in the discourse, only now from the perspective of skincare technology in 2026. The sharper jawline caught the attention of several. Others mentioned the brighter eyes and smoother skin. The response itself was genuine regardless of how inflated the claims were. At 67, Kyle was once again at the forefront of discussions concerning memory, image, and reinvention.